Howdy, and welcome back to You've Got People Problems, where we tackle leadership challenges that no one wants to talk about, but every business faces. I'm your host, Melissa Ortiz with Activate Human Capital Group, and this is episode 8. Today, I'm joined by Leslie Camacho, a guru in the EOS space who knows firsthand how getting people decisions right can change everything in a business. We're specifically talking about letting go of the vine, about building or sometimes rebuilding our leadership teams. In this episode, we dive into why getting the right people in the right seats is the first step to success, how EOS helps fix people problems and drive business growth, and what leaders can do today to create better team alignment. If you've ever felt like your team isn't working the way it should, you're struggling with hiring, or accountability keeps slipping, this episode is for you. Let's get to it. Leslie, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Melissa. I am very happy and excited to be here. This is it's one of my favorite subjects because it's really hard to do anything if you don't have the right people with you. So it's like one of the very first things we got to get right.
It's amazing how much more fun work can be when you do have the right people. And I don't know, it just seems like so often we don't have the courage to take care of the people problems because we have invested a lot. I just wrote a blog article on escalation of commitment the other day. It's like, I've invested so much in this person or this project, and letting go of it can be really hard, or sometimes just dealing with the issues can be really hard. So I'm looking forward to this conversation tremendously.
Yeah, that courage, I think we could probably spend the entire time just talking about that one thing right there.
Maybe that's the next
Yeah,
episode, the courage to deal with your people
that's
problems.
right.
Awesome. Well, Leslie, I would love to have you introduce yourself, your EOS um, background, and then maybe what the heck is EOS if someone hasn't heard of that acronym before.
Sure. So let's start with that last one because I think that gives context to my background, at least in terms of being an EOS implementer. So EOS stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's based on the book Traction by Gino Wickman. It's been around for over 20 years at this point. Used by tens of thousands of companies. And so a professional EOS implementer like myself takes the concepts of traction, which are organized into 6 key components, and helps the owner and their leadership team implement EOS into their business. And without like going on a tangent, what each of those components are at a high level, EOS promises vision. So it means everyone in your company knows where the company is going and how you're going to get there. It promises traction, which is a high level of accountability for every employee. Sometimes we describe it as everyone rowing in the same direction. So going back to that people issue, if you can imagine one person in a canoe, kayak, Olympic racing, whatever it is, if one person is rowing the wrong direction, you're not going to it doesn't matter how powerful everyone else is, you're just going to go in circles. So traction, everyone working on the right things, a lot of self-empowerment. And then the last one is health. And so that last promise is regardless of how healthy your team is when you start EOS, we want to intentionally build team health. Because it's a team health-based decision-making culture in EOS. We want the best idea to win versus benevolent dictators or chaos or anything else. So vision, traction, and health. Those are the 3 big EOS promises. And I help teams and their leaders do that.
I have to say, Leslie, being in the EOS space for so long, running my business on EOS, what I tend to see is the people who choose to what's called self-implement,
Mm-hmm.
often really struggle to gain that traction. And
Yes.
often they'll bring in an EOS implementer and say, look, we've spent a lot of time and money trying to do this on our own. Can you help us do this? Because it's hard to facilitate for your own team. It's hard to be present in the meeting and be running the meeting. And so I often see people try it twice because they saw some benefit. They implemented a level 10 meeting. They're improving, but their iterations are slower than finding someone to support and hold them accountable, because as business owners, there are very few people who can really hold us accountable, and we need that. So I'm grateful for the work that you do. I think it's incredibly important, and I absolutely love the EOS space. So thank you for being with us.
Yeah,
I
very
will
much so.
say
Yep.
also, I love the rowboat analogy. I use it all the time. I think it is the simplest, cleanest, that and a symphony, I think are probably my two
Yes.
favorite analogies for teams, because when you have a person either asleep in the rowboat or taking the oar and putting it in the water, trying to throw us off track, that really is what happens when we don't have healthy teams.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
and heaven forbid you're in a symphony and someone's off key, it just kind of ruins the whole moment.
Yes. Yeah. Or like the percussion is offbeat. It throws the whole thing off.
That's awesome. Well, if you're not familiar with me, my name is Melissa Ortiz. I've spent the last 18 years of my life optimizing talent in organizations. And I think the way I think about it is the right pair of shoes. You don't wear a pair of high heels to run a marathon. You don't wear a pair of hiking boots to the prom. You've got to find when you get the right person in the right seat, it's like the most comfortable pair of shoes custom made for the activity that you're doing. And you don't think about it. It isn't a distraction. It doesn't leave you with blisters. And when we get the right people in the right seats, it's kind of magical and we help them be engaged and retained. So that's really my space, employee engagement, talent fit to role. And I seem to be eternally infatuated with that space. So it's been a fun place to invest my career, I guess. So Leslie, let's start with you. You've been helping companies operate on EOS for how long?
For just over 3 years. We go to these things called boot camp, and mine was very easy to remember because it was Valentine's Day. So every Valentine's Day, it's been another year helping companies implement EOS. So it's been 3 years for me this past February.
And tell me, as you've been going down this path, and maybe especially in the last 6 months, what are the main people problems you're seeing? We've all got people problems. Every single organization I know has some kind of people problems. What are you seeing that's relevant?
So I think the through line, not only just from the last 6 months, but from the very beginning, has been I I tend to really connect with teams where their primary people issue is that they all like, respect, maybe even they'll use the word love in a professional, platonic sense, love each other, and they've been together quite a while, but they've never really had open, honest conversations, especially at the leadership level. So they talk past each other and they don't really hold themselves accountable. So sometimes what this will look like is that the owner has started the company, and the length of time is kind of immaterial, whether it was 6 months ago or even 10 years ago. And they have essentially individual contributors that may manage their departments well, and be good at delegating or spreading their expertise inside their department. But that then at the leadership level, they can't seem to grow past themselves. Like they've hit this ceiling, and it's because they don't hold each other accountable because they like each other too much. And that has turned into a passive acceptance of the status quo, except they're no longer growing. And so sometimes there can be passive aggressive comments, or there can be a lot of indecision will take place. And then cracks start forming because since they won't hold themselves accountable and they've grown to whatever size it happens to be, whether it's 10 people, 50 people, 100 people, there's a lot of variation on how far a company can get before they not take it seriously, but they systematize it. So it takes away some of the subjectivity from it. And they really
Some of the
begin to,
dependability on the force energy of one
yes,
person or just a core group.
exactly. So if they don't
Okay.
hold themselves accountable, then they stop holding each other accountable. And so there's just this downstream effect, and then trust starts breaking. And then when trust starts breaking, everything just kind of atrophies, and it can go very quickly. There's a quote that comes to mind that a mentor of mine brought up recently, where it's like, how does bankruptcy happen? Slowly over time, and then suddenly all at once. And I feel like the erosion of trust, when the leadership team doesn't hold each other accountable to the same standards they would like to see the rest of their employees, that's kind of how it happens, a slow erosion of trust. And then there's a real sudden break that can cause serious issues. So it's normally we like each other too much and we don't hold each other accountable because of it. And we mistake that for kindness.
To determine to be gentle, and we aren't.
Yes. Yes.
I see. Interesting. So our topic today, we talked about being letting go of the vine, building or rebuilding our leadership teams. How does this trust component play into that? Does it end up falling apart? We lose a key player and then we need to rebuild. What was really on your mind as we were thinking and prepping about this session?
I think a lot of it comes back to, um, so what comes to mind is there is a concept I rely on a lot with the teams that I talk to that comes from Kim Scott's amazing book called Radical Candor. And she talks about this concept called ruinous empathy. And again, the teams that tend to find me, so I have a selection bias because of the fit of me personally as an implementer for teams. And so the concept of ruinous empathy is essentially I am going to only say nice, encouraging things instead of hold you to a standard. And so I think if I say the right things, encouraging things, empowering things enough, that is a replacement for talking about the thing we actually need to fix. And so like often I will see this in like if I'm working with the software team or something where the quality of the product begins to slip. Instead of directly addressing that with the proper people, I'll say, well, let's see if we can get the product back up, or let's see if we can improve the quality. I know you guys got it, or your team has it, and you are so great at this. And that's a leadership skill from a cultural perspective, but it's not a management skill of actually saying quality needs to mean this specific thing, and now this number is slipping. And do we understand the process behind it? Who's in charge of that process? Are we holding that specific person responsible for this, or this specific team? Or they? So we will say things that talk around the thing instead of getting really specific. And
I'm hearing you
saying,
say something like vague generalities, like the quality needs
yes,
to improve, but we don't know what a win looks like as a team to say, okay, quality's improved this much.
yes. And to role play it back, Melissa, I hear you. I'm going to improve the quality. I've got this. I'm going to talk to my team. We're going to get it back up to standard. And we mistake that for a complete conversation versus the opening to an important conversation. A better conversation would be, oh, Melissa, where are you seeing the quality slip? Like, I agree. Is it this number or this outcome, or which client's unhappy? And then my response would hopefully be, oh, okay. Yeah, there is a trend that it's slipping here. And I can see on this particular tool, like in EOS, we have a weekly, we call it a scorecard. That is, these are the most important numbers that we want to keep on track every week. So our client success scorecard, here's where it's dropping. And Susan and Keith are in charge of that. And so I want to go in, I'll talk with them. I'm their manager. I take responsibility for that number. I want to get that number back above bar. I think I can do this in 30 days. Is that an acceptable time frame, or do we need to fast track this? That is a really different conversation than what we opened with. And then if I can't get that back on track, we can't have that conversation indefinitely. So is there a process for holding me as the manager accountable if I'm not doing it? And so again, we have to take the specific compassionate empathy that you expressed and have to dial it into very specific things that need to be managed, people held accountable, and get detailed with it. And then if I can't, then we have an entirely different problem.
There's this great quote that one of the executive coaches I work with uses that goes like this: the biggest fallacy about communication is that it has occurred.
Yes, that's fantastic.
And so
Yeah.
often it's like, I thought I gave you the message that quality was a problem and you were going to
Yeah.
fix it. And you're like, yes, yes, I'm going to fix it. But what really transpired was near zero. Yep,
Yeah.
we're working on, that's what we do. We work on quality. What do you want from me? And so I thought I've solved the problem. I walk away feeling good. Okay, we had the conversation. You're kind of left wondering, or
Yes. Yeah. In EOS terms, we would call this setting clear expectations. So are you setting clear expectations? Are they specific? Will I come back 30 days later and know that I have done a good job? Because there's a number that's managed, or there's a specific goal to be reached. Like there's a concrete way for me to say, yes, Melissa, I've done what's asked, and we've agreed on that in detail going out of that initial conversation. And I can do that same thing with my direct reports. They can do that with their team. And so we want that feel good, empowering coaching aspect to what we do. On the leadership side, we separate those into two clear skills. There's leadership skills, and then there's management skills. And to work with our teams, we really need both. And so a lot of the initial people issues coming in are we like each other too much. And so I like how you put it, we think that we're communicating, but we haven't actually communicated. And so then we're not really on the same page, and there's not clear expectations, and we're avoiding it because somewhere along there's probably a really important conversation that we haven't had because we're afraid of what it will mean. And usually when it's a people issue, we're afraid this person's going to quit or I have to fire them. One of those two things.
And we'd rather just avoid that path.
Yes, exactly.
I have to say, the last 18 years of administering and analyzing employee engagement surveys for organizations, the single most important finding is expectations. The expectations of my job are clear to me. If the difference between a 5 performer and a 4 performer, if I respond with a 5, I'm like, hell yes, all the time. I know this. I know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, how to prioritize and reprioritize. But if I'm a 4 on a 1 to 5 scale, it's what's expected of me, and the difference in their level of performance between those two players, a little confused and super crystal clear, is tremendous. And
Yes.
So we're always trying to get to full clarity of absolute, yes, this condition is this for me all the time. I'm clear. And if I'm not, I have the responsibility to go and ask, hey, what do you mean by that? How do we define quality? I think I'm a little unclear here. And having a level of vulnerability to say, I'm not clear, so that I can go back and win. Because otherwise, nobody wants to suck at work. That's one of my mantras. It's hard to win if you don't know where the finish line is.
Yes. Yeah. And to yes and what you just said, if I know, because you've set clear expectations and I'm a great performer, my own job satisfaction then goes through the roof. Because then I'm walking into, like in EOS, we call them quarterly conversations, my one-on-one with you. And unless something outside of my control has gone wrong, I know whether or not I'm going to have a great conversation with you as my boss. Because you set those expectations, I've met those expectations, there's a process behind those expectations, there's weekly measurements of those expectations. And so along the way, I know that I'm doing a good job. I know my manager has my back. I know my team has my back. There is transparency in all of that. And so we have a trustable system that it makes really clear we're rowing the same direction. Because I think that's the difficult part in the analogy. If we all say we're rowing the same direction, that's really easy to tell if we're in a boat. But if we're in a remote company, or we're not talking on a daily basis, or we're not sure what the priorities are, like from a visual perspective, it can be very difficult to see if we're rowing in the same direction. So a lot of what we want to do with EOS is like simple tools that gives that clarity with the most important stuff on a regular basis.
And I think that's really where we came to the topic today, which is letting go of the vine.
Yes.
Because I can't ever feel like I can let go, whether I'm a team lead, a leadership team member, or the owner of the company. I can't ever let go if we haven't communicated exactly what the expectations are of the things I'm letting go of. If you're going to pick up what I'm putting down, I've got to know that you know in its entirety what the thing is and how to make sure it's properly taken care of. Is that what you see as well?
Yes, that's 100% there. Because going back to that concept of communicating but not communicating, that erodes trust. So what you describe, then what will happen is that if I'm the owner of the company and I am building a leadership team for the first time, the biggest challenge is trusting the person that I'm letting go of the work to. And so if there is a system that allows transparency where I can take all this informal internal expertise around the thing I've built the company around, I have to be able to translate that and set those expectations and get that knowledge out of my head and make it transferable and have a way of identifying, in EOS, we call it right person, right seat. That's going to take care of that part of the job that I used to do. So I can do the thing as the owner that's actually the most valuable now and delegate that away. And if you don't have the right person to hand that off to, you don't trust them, you're not sure if they're good at their job, it's going to be almost impossible for you to let go of the vine, and rightly so, because of it. So we want to create that environment of trust.
Yeah, it's it can be such a challenge to develop that kind of trust, because what I see with the owners I work with, whether or not they're running on EOS, is no one's them. No one's ever going to be them. And so getting it out of their head, they make it so complicated when often the thing isn't that complicated. But
Yes,
I
yeah.
spend a lot of time with them piecemealing out, okay, what is the main idea of what you need to offload? Okay, great. Then what are the tasks that are associated with? About how much time do those take, so they can have a clear understanding of what am I taking on in taking this one responsibility or role. And that tends to be an important exercise. And often if I ask them to do that on their own, they go, but if I just get on the phone or on Zoom or in person at a table with them and I take notes and they just kind of chat it out with me, it's amazing how quickly we can get to, okay, well, this is what you're trying to do. Here are the things you're doing. Here's how much time it's taking. And then it's easy for
Right.
them to say, okay, I'm going to train you how to do this one. I'm going to take a video of how I do this one, and we can piecemeal it out. And I think that's one of the things that we miss. We take this high level approach. You're going to take on, repair orders. But in my mind, here are the 5 things that means. And
Right. And if it's not written down somewhere in EOS, we might call that a core process, for example. And so what I usually will help companies do in a situation like that, and that I suspect you help them go way deeper once the fundamentals are in place. So in EOS, to go back to this idea of trust, like what allows the owner to let go? In EOS, we say there's only 2 people issues. We want right person, right seat. So a right person is someone that shares the core values of our organization. And so we work to discover an organization's core values, and a core value has to be actionable, or it has to be real and live. So we want to be able to hire, fire, review, reward, and recognize from these core values. And so we actually measure someone's ability to live out those core values together, because that creates, the byproduct of that is our culture. And so that's right person. So we have a trustable set of characteristics. The other side is right seat, and right seat is, are they good at their job? And the tool we use for that is called gets it, wants it, and then capacity. So gets it is, do they understand it at a high level? Do they just get the role, what they're accountable for, what it's required? So do they understand it? Wants it is, do they actually want to do this work? And I think the important differentiator in wants it is, it's not do they want a job, it's does this work refill their energy? Can they restore? If they do this on a regular basis, will they burn out? Or will they be excited that, I can't believe I get to, this is my job. I get to do this. I love doing this work. It refills their energy. And then capacity fills more into what we would consider normal job evaluation. Do I have the skill set? Do I have the experience? But it can also mean, do I have the time and energy for it as well? And so when we look at building trust for that owner, the ability to delegate, we want both things to be yes. So we set standards for each of those. And I loved how you talk about the hell yes, because in EOS, when we say gets it, wants it, capacity, we use that binary. It's either a hell yes or a no. And if it's not a no, can we get them to a yes?
yeah.
And so when we take that, we use something called an accountability chart that has those roles at a high level. And then those roles can translate to the core processes that they might be responsible for, or the numbers they're responsible for on a regular basis. And so when we roll those out, if I'm the owner, what that lets me do is say, do I have a people problem or do I have a process problem? And so if I know specifically what I'm supposed to be doing as your employee, because you've communicated that to me through the accountability chart. You've evaluated me and my core values. My core values match that of your organization. You've evaluated, does he gets it, wants it, has the capacity to do this job? And it's yes across the board. But something's going wrong. Then instead of saying, Leslie, what's wrong with you? Why can't you perform this job? You see these yeses and positive indicators across the board. And so you can say, oh, it's probably a process issue. Have I trained you on this? Is this documented somewhere? Maybe you just need some training for this. But if those other things are wrong, then I can't go through it. So that's at a high level. That's what we try to do to get that trust across to people.
Yeah. I have to say, what I see more than anything is the discrepancy in the wants it. Because I do want a
Yes.
job, I want a good job, and I want you to know that I want this job as a candidate. But when it comes down to doing the work, I'm burnout, I'm exhausted. I feel like everything is just one more too much, and pretty soon it's the straw that broke the camel's back. And I think that's probably why I've loved the predictive index. I love behavioral assessments. I should have been a psych major undergrad, but StrengthsFinder is one of my favorites. But its core flaw is it doesn't give us any indicator of where we're being stretched outside of our comfort zone. And I think the thing I love about predictive index is in a 5-minute assessment, we can figure out so clearly if someone is being their, we call it their stretchy pattern. Where are they stretching to be effective in their role? That's them getting messaging that either they're exactly who they need to be and there is no stretch. That's when we know they want it. They just, it fills them up. And the way they approach it is welcome and celebrated. But if that's not the case, that want it suffers because it's a burden, it's exhausting, it creates imposter syndrome because I know what my team needs from me, but it's innately not me. So now I have to spend this amount of energy being who I need to be, and all I have left to do that work is this. Versus if I show up with shoes on and I'm the right person, all my capacity is directed at doing good work. And so I think that's the thing I just love doing with teams is this quick pulse on, are we in the right seats? And we can see it visually. And there are two options. One, you're trying to emulate the leader who trained you, whether that's the owner, a director of a team, and you're trying to do it their way. And someone just needs to give you a permission to slip to go do it your way. That's an easy win. But more often than not, you're just in the wrong seat.
Yes.
And we have to decide if we're going to repot someone into a different seat because we have space, or we have to free up their future. And that can be a really hard conversation that people avoid.
And what I love about that is that when I have a team and they get to work with something like you, it takes something that is like, do they want something? Do they actually want this job? Like when I encounter teams, that is usually very subjective. And so I can describe it, I can go what they're doing it, but going back to this concept of we all like each other too much or we've been together so long, because that gets so subjective, in EOS, I can usually read it in the body language. Do you want the job? Yes. And often it will be out of a sense of loyalty or this is how we've gotten this far. So I would love to know more. Like you talked about predictive index. One of the things I would love to hear from you is whether you're working with an EOS person like myself or some other outside person, or when you're going directly to the leadership of a team, like you listed some indicators, but how do we know when it's time to bring someone like you in or what assessment to use? Because that goes down to a deeper level and that can defang some of the personal, where am I going with this? How does a tool like that help give courage? Because going back to what you said at the very opening, like it's that lack of courage. Like often we will say decisions are made out of love or fear. And so if you're fearing this decision and it's all personal, we often need more tools or more something else to say, we need to make this decision out of love. And here is some information that will help us flip that. So how does like predictive index help a team change that decision point?
I think so. I will say this. I have the same approach with when do we bring in an EOS implementer?
Yeah.
Sooner than later, because the amount of time, energy, and heartache we will spend as a business owner myself, working with business owners, I watch us agonize over people issues. We treat these people like they're family to us. And we often put them in positions where they want to perform for us. You talked about out of
Yep.
loyalty. I want to be who you need me to be, but I am killing myself to be that person. And so we're doing more harm than good by not addressing those. And so the sooner we can get clear on what's going on, how do we with love address you're a really detail oriented person, but the thing I need you to be is the throw you in the deep end and figure it out kind of guy. And I think
Yes.
I'm doing you a disservice. And I can see how much strain you're putting on yourself. When you can visibly see these patterns, you don't have to read them clearly to know, oh, wow, this person's on one end of the spectrum in their natural self and their stretchy adapted pattern is over here. This is strain I'm putting on this person every day. Is that fair to them? It's not. And so often with a very, very quick evaluation, that can start to tip the scales in terms of I'm not letting them down by doing something. I'm letting them down by doing nothing. And that's
Yes.
I think that the
Yes.
thing that tends to flip the script. And then we get to talk about, okay, so now what? What's the issue? So what? How's it affecting the business and the person, all the people involved? And now what do we do about it? And then we can just evaluate what those options are. It doesn't have to be some big long engagement to get clear on a people issue. And that's, I think, what I love about this work is it's like, let's bring data, which is one of the core components of EOS, to some of these people issues that so often live in a world of emotion and subjective interactions.
Uh, and I think that one of the things I really love about that approach is that it makes everything more actionable to everyone involved. If I get that type of feedback, it will help me understand, not just in the job I may have at the moment, or knowing I need to change roles internally, or what skill sets I'm good at, but it also helps my future career, like whatever I do next. And hopefully I am voluntarily making the decision about what I do next in my career. But I think a great boss, a great leadership and management team provides that sort of really actionable career growth. Because otherwise you get really stuck, and that's where the burnout happens again. So bringing those tools to go deeper at that level, and make it actionable in a way that's also empowering. Like, I love that perspective, and that's a great way to turn that from a fear-based decision into something that's loving, compassionate, and for the greater good of the business. It kind of like hits everything across the board there.
I would say that's one thing I think as founders on leadership teams we're guilty of is we don't spend enough time really digging deeper into how is this affecting the business? How's this affecting our teams and our customers? Because we get kind of blinded by these people issues that are people we care about and we've worked shoulder to shoulder with for so long. And stepping back to see the forest for the trees, I think that's where an outside partner can be great to just ask some questions and say, yeah, how's this affecting the business? How's this affecting your financials? And helping them start to tie that together, that then of course makes it more actionable, because then it's a cleaner, it's a bigger picture than just this one little pinch point.
And I think the other thing that is occurring to me is going back to how do I let go of the vine, build or rebuild this team? As the owner, a good first step is for me to take that assessment, to me to lead by example, to understand, because often what will happen is as the owner, I've taken the business as far as I go through it and expertise. And so like there's a cliche but very real concept of I'm working in the business versus on the business. And if I'm in EOS, we will call it the visionary seat, the person responsible for the long term of the company. if I've been doing a particular skill set of or expertise, that may not actually be the most valuable thing to the company anymore. And I may have been off the front line. So, like if I'm working with a design company, a UX or a marketing company, and the owner has been outside of frontline strategy or effective marketing tactics for years now, but they're still trying to engage in that work, and everyone else is saying, please let go, or this is the thing. If I have the courage to work with an assessment, an outside person to help me understand myself first, then I want to model by example. Like one of the things we talk about is you got to walk the talk. So I can't just say, hey, you go take this assessment because you really need it. But if I'm modeling that at the outstart, and then I'm having the leadership team model it, and then we're actually acting on it appropriately, that can be a really good way to spark who you actually need on that leadership team, how you're going to hold each other accountable, and set a tone for everybody else as well.
Taking off on that, what I find is it's kind of like there's this mantra, leaders eat last,
Yes.
but also leaders need to go first. They need to lead the way, they need
Yes.
to model the way. And so
Yeah.
what I mostly find with people who are the visionary of their organization, the CEO, the president, whoever's leading the charge, they tend to be very open to opportunity, aka risk seeking, where a lot of the people around them will be more risk averse to balance them out. They tend to like to be in the driver's seat. And that being in the driver's seat is so hard to give up because they don't really like sitting in the passenger seat. They don't like reading the map. They like to go and drive and be the one. And I see that all the time. What you're saying is they want to dabble in the details that maybe they're not the best person to be dabbling in. They're making their team members crazy. I have a CEO I worked with that he ran a farming operation, and he was trying to retire, and his son was taking over the business. And his son said to him, Dad, when you come around, the guys get nervous and then they make mistakes because they're so petrified. You're a really intense personality, and I need you to not talk to our guys. I need you to only talk to me. And it was
Yeah.
the single best change they made in the business because the guys were calmer, they made less mistakes, they destroyed less equipment. But it was one of those things where he needed a mirror to say, too much, too much. And so when we get a good assessment and some good feedback, it's like, oh, yeah, I totally do that. Okay, great. Well, here's the problems you're creating in your own business. Oh, well, that sucks. I don't want to do that. Okay, great. Here are some strategies how to prevent that. And it's a more intellectual exercise, which they're usually into. It's not a shame thing. It's not we don't want you, which especially long-term founders we have a challenge with because, well, what do you want me to do now? But at least it's something tangible and tactical that they can go, yes, I can change that behavior.
Yes. Yeah. And again, a recurring theme I'm hearing between the two of us is that building trust requires those clear expectations. The clearer the expectations, the more likely you will have courage across all these things. And your story reminded me that I got that feedback when I was the CEO of a small software company. I remember I had gotten out of a meeting that I thought had went well. I thought it was like, man, we just set the tone and this, and I'm excited. And 5 minutes later, I got a call from my COO. And he's like, hey, your lead designer and engineer are ready to quit. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? And then he gave me the feedback. He's like, well, this is the third time within that you have switched directions, and everyone feels like, and I had no idea I was doing it. Like I didn't know. I didn't know. I had to have that feedback, and he was specific, actionable, set a clear expectation. Please let me do this. And that was one of the things, like, I should no longer, now that I'm the CEO, I should no longer be managing this team. And I have a really awesome COO. Why wasn't I letting him do that in the first place? Why was I even there?
It's
To begin
fun.
with.
That's why.
Yes, yeah, because I
That's our
used to be
visionary
good at it,
profession.
and I did not want to let go. And it was, I mean, this was over 15 years ago, and I can still feel it in my stomach. That was a very important moment. And so that goes back to like something you said is like when we can give this clear expectation, it really helps us with that opportunity to grow, be better people, and actually let go of the things that we should be letting go of.
and it goes right back to our beginning conversation around courage, because none of this stuff
Yes.
is easy. And I don't ever pretend that the people stuff is easy.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
it's hard and it hurts
Yes.
your gut and you avoid it. But once you do it, I I was working with a team who had a very toxic general manager, and everybody knew the guy needed to go. And the owner drug his feet. They had 20 years of history. He trusted the guy. The guy managed up really well. And when they finally removed that person, it was amazing how this groundswell of encouragement, thank you, finally, and they all worked together to cover this guy's workload because they were so grateful that someone had taken out this high performing, very difficult person. And I think
Right.
that is the single most challenging people problem. And when we have to rebuild our leadership team, it's usually because we've either terminated or lost that, I call them high performing jerks.
Yes. Yeah.
They just wreak havoc across the organization. They're often in sales. Um, and someone's worried that we're going to lose this revenue if the person goes, but it's always an at what cost conversation. And so, as we rebuild these teams, there are some really good tools out there that can help us define what do we need in this moment of our business, in this current role. Who is the right person who will get it, want it, and have the capacity? And if we can do a good pre-hire assessment, that's the other reason I love predictive index, is because you can use it for employee development and hiring legally, where a lot of the other ones you can't. We can get a clear picture of, when we rebuild this team, who needs to be a part of that team? How will they operate? Um, I'll give an example. I was working with a company running on EOS who wanted a new chief financial officer. And when we went through the what do you need, they said, we need someone who's really warm and welcoming. It's like, ooh, financial people are generally more analytical and reserved. Tell me more about that. And they said, well, the last person we had was so abrasive, so direct, and so unfriendly that we think it's going to, anybody who looks and feels like that will get bucketed right back with that person and won't be
Mm.
accepted openly. And I was like, okay, so we're going to look for an extroverted, enthusiastic CFO. And they're like, yes. And my God, they found one. And it was a really interesting path because that wasn't a standard template that a CFO runs on. And so to know that going in, I think was really beneficial. I know it was, to go through that process to know who is the right fit, that human for that spot.
Yes. Yeah. And I agree. The wrong person, right seat. That's the much more boring EOS phrase for high performing jerk, because they're destroying your culture, right? And so, like, it sets this tone that just degrades your core values and the culture. And yeah, having those data points is so good. One of the things I wanted to ask you, that this is a good like carry on, or a good place I think to do that, is how do you help? Like, I think that was a really good story. Can you dig into how you would actually help a team implement that in the hiring process?
It's actually amazingly easier than you would think. When I was at Gallup for years,
Mm-hmm.
it was a $250,000 process that took about 6 months, a whole lot of research, and a lot of high performers that we needed to compare them to. Now, that's obviously wholly inaccessible to most businesses in this world. And when I stumbled on Predictive Index, the thing I was so taken by was the simplicity, but it wasn't just like, you need a CFO, here's the template for a good CFO. No, we crowdsource the people who are the stakeholders in the process, even if we've never hired for this role before. And we say, what are the demands of this role? What kind of person do you want in this role? And we do that through a structured interview that takes about 7 to 10 minutes for each stakeholder to take on their own. Then we compile those together, square up any places there's a lot of discrepancy. We bring that together and agree on what's acceptable and ideal. And then it creates this beautifully written job description from a talent perspective. The ideal person looks like this, that will either repel the wrong people and go, nope, which we hope to do with our core values as well, or draw in the right people and go, oh, wait, that's me. And that actually happened to me when I was at Gallup. When I was applying to Gallup, I read a job description, Leslie, and it was basically for a talent optimization consultant. And I was like, oh my God, that's me. And none of the rest of it mattered. They took me out of the hiring pool because I was finishing my MBA and applying, and they said, "Oh, sorry, we don't hire MBAs. Y'all want too much money." And I said, "I don't think you understand. This is the job that I want."
Right.
And so I took the lowest paying job in my MBA class because it was the want it, right? And if we can craft better job descriptions, must lift 50 pounds, must work in office, must process financial statements, boring. We want someone who's super detailed, who has a high sense of urgency. Things that speak to people's core are going to draw them in. And we might find a diamond in the rough who maybe doesn't have the same experience level we hope for, but they've got aptitude in spades and they're a culture fit. So when we go through the process of crowdsourcing, what do you need? We define it, we get a job description out of it, we get a talent assessment that matches each person and overlays them on a 1 to 10 fit score, both behaviorally and cognitively. Now we've really got one leg of the stool nailed in. One leg of the stool being aptitude, the others being culture fit and background and experience, education, what have you. So when you balance all three of those together, because none of them by themselves are good enough, and we have to do that balance. And I have one client who every time they do this, every time they hire someone new, they get the stakeholders on. We set a 45-minute meeting. We craft the job scope. They send out to the candidates that they've amassed. They interview a week later. And it's just a rhythm where I think all in the stakeholders are in between setting up the profile and reviewing candidates together. They're in like an hour and a half. This is not a huge time investment. So I love the efficiency of it compared to my time at Gallup. And the price point is, probably 2,500 compared to 250,000.
I'm glad I asked because I feel like I'm going to be able to clip that out and send it to clients. Because again, the idea, like often the fear that we have as owners is that finding the right person is going to be really expensive. So if I'm dealing with a high performing jerk and they're on my leadership team, I might have that outsized fear that fixing this is a 250,000 Gallup sized problem. When in actuality, if I get the tools, I slow down to be intentional, and I really work the problem down to its simplest form, it's actually not as complicated as people think. It's still very challenging. So it's not necessarily easy, but it isn't this huge beast that we think it is. And if you're the owner trying to build that team, it's going to help build trust into your own process, into your own decision making. And when you have that person, then you can find the second person, then you can find the third. You can use the tool downstream. So again, it's like the repeating theme I'm hearing is you have to have the courage, you have to get data points, you have to flip it from fear to love, and then consistently apply that until you've got the team that you need there. And it takes time. It takes time, but it's not. I think the fear of solving people issues is so outweighed in our heads versus what you get on the other side. How great it is to work with a team that actually wants to be there. Like so many clients will let their people issues go 6-7 months, and every quarter I'm there, please, you got to solve this. I can see it. You can see it. When are you going to act on it? And often it comes back to, well, they've been with us for so long. And what I try to encourage, imagine if someone wanted to be here because they were excited about the thing you want to accomplish. And it's not just loyalty, but it's the shared energy, excitement about common goals and shared characteristics. And so that's typically where I will find an owner coming in as a client, is that they're really stuck in understanding just how critical that is. And I love the tools that help simplify that, even if the decision itself still remains very challenging.
And I think this is a permission slip to anybody listening to this, that it's okay to need a partner. It's okay to need someone like Leslie or myself to talk it through, to get clear, that has separate outside eyes, not somebody on your team, help you define what's at stake here and what are my options. And I think so often that's what we're missing, is we just kind of stew. We may talk to our spouse about it. We may talk to one team member we really trust, but we just kind of go round and round what we in EOS call ID, identify and discuss. Identify and discuss.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm frustrated, but the solve We
Yeah.
don't get all the way there. And so we can be great accountability partners to be like, if you want to solve this issue, happy to help you process this. We're not going to tell you what to do, but we'll help you define the options. And then if you need an accountability partner, we're happy to be that. And that can be such a gift, whether you're in a, an EO or a Vistage group, those can be great accountability partners to just set a line in the sand. Like, I'm going to deal with this issue by February 8th, by September 25th, whatever your timeline is, just put a stake in the sand and have someone as your partner to help you talk it through and get there.
I just want to, probably because of what we were talking about pre-call, we inadvertently talked about the Crystal Cathedral and kind of my religious upbringing a little bit, but it's just an amen to that is what I'm going for.
That's amazing. Well, I know we're getting close to the end of our time, Leslie. I'd love to have you and I just quip a little bit about what are some of the key takeaways when we're thinking about building and rebuilding our teams, when we're thinking about having the courage, because we just went there anyway. We may still need a
Yep.
separate discussion on that. What are some of the things that really come to mind? And I'll start so I don't just call you to the table. I'll give you a second to think. One of the ones that I love that comes up is such a great visual for all of us is envisioning our team, whether that's our leadership team or any department team or location team, as a group in a rowboat. We all have an oar. We want everyone to be rowing in the same direction, but when they're off, it's amazing how it slows us down. And then thinking about solving those people problems so that we can continue to build or unfortunately potentially rebuild that team. What comes to you for this conversation that resonated?
So I want to start with the most practical things first from a more of a company-wide or a broader perspective than the individual owner or owners. And that's the best tools are often the simplest ones because they will curate from 1,000 data points to just some high-level ones that become actionable. And so
Give me a
the
for
way you
instance.
talk, so the way you talked about predictive instance, like do they want the job or not? How are we going to get specific about that in a way that is useful for my company specifically, for this team specifically? And so then you can help evaluate, do they actually want it? Because it's not always easy to identify. So the tool makes it simple. Is this a yes or a no? And if it's a yes, why is it a yes? And having a tool to understand that, that you can now share that knowledge. So you take away a lot of the subjective pattern. And when you take away the subjective, you reduce or eliminate against the fear. And so you can see how it lines up with your values, with the needs of the organization. And so it makes it easier to identify those issues and then to act on them in a data-driven way that is data-driven, but it also honors the values of the organization, the culture of the organization. So I love the practicality of that. The other thing is that you can't fix people problems with process. And a lot of the tools that we talked about today and the back and forth, it really comes to, do I have a way to know whether this is a people issue or a process issue? And if I can't identify that, then that becomes some of the initial work. I need to do the work to make sure I've got my core processes in place, the structure, what people are accountable for, and often going back, can I set clear expectations? And if I can't set clear expectations, like there's a specific number that needs to be maintained or go up or down or process that needs to be completed consistently, then I probably have some work to do to get that figured out until I can set that clear expectation because of the trust and job satisfaction. But the number one thing is, do I have the courage to act? Because if we've hit a ceiling and we can't progress, the problem is always in the leadership room, and meaning that in that leadership team, the answer is there. And if the answer is not there, you've got to rebuild part of the team. And as the owner, the best recommendation is find 30 minutes in your week, go take a walk, have some quiet time. Because you said something as we were wrapping up that is almost always true. I rarely need to tell a client what to do, and we're encouraged not to. I'm not a consultant in that way. So if I'm telling a client what to do, I've actually done something wrong on my end. Clients almost always know what need to do when it comes to a people issue, but can they find the courage? And so it's not just the rowboat going the right direction, but do you believe in where you're going? And it often as the owner, the courage is to go back, really think about, I want this business so that here's the things I want out of life, the things I want to give to my employees, the change I want to make, that high level, deep inner why that will provide that. So yes to everything we talked, and then the extra bonus homework, whipped cream on top of the cake and ice cream is find out why you're dig into your why. Just take some quiet time. I want a healthy business so that, and then tie that back into your decision making.
When we do make those hard decisions, the quote I use is that we get better engagement through attrition sometimes.
Yes.
When we have one of those high performing jerks, it's amazing how it will buoy everyone else because you said that doesn't work here. And that tells all the other high performers like, thank you. And
yes.
I really appreciated what you said about leveraging data like predictive index to rebuild or build your team, because people data science has come so far in the last 20 years. And I'm not it's like artificial intelligence plus human intelligence. And when we can put those together, neither one is sometimes enough. Interviews can be so subjective. They are by nature so subjective. And I have a frustration that I've seen over so many years that the extroverts of the world, they win in interviews. And it's not fair to the introverts of the world because they're not effusive. They don't show up and win over a room. But guess what? They tend to be some of the best team players who stay longer. So they're at this innate disadvantage. And when you can decouple that a little bit and put some data in it, you're more likely to find that overall good fit. And so that's part of the reason this has been eternally beneficial to clients and fun for me, is we're creating some opportunities for people who might have been looked over.
Yes, please, and thank you to that. No notes. As an introvert, no notes.
and really coming back, I'm gonna close it with this. It's all about expectations. Met or unmet expectations define how we feel about our relationships with our mother-in-laws, with our spouses, with our kids, with our colleagues. It permeates every bit of life. And so the better we can do at clarifying what our expectations really are, often to ourselves too, because we say these vague things without ever defining them for ourselves or others, help others around you win. And
yes.
that requires some clear expectations. If you could just get that right with your team, it's amazing how much increase you'll see with engagement over time. So Leslie, I'm so grateful for this conversation. I am going to put up our contact information so that if you want to contact Leslie about EOS, if you want to contact me about solving just people problems, it would absolutely be my pleasure, because I think these are they're problems we're solving. They're worth taking the time and the courage. And gosh darn it, I got to get the thing up. So Leslie, are there any closing words you would like to share?
No, like I felt like we really covered the emotional aspect and then brought tools into it. And that's really what I'm looking for when we talk about people issues. Get that clarity, find that courage. Yes, please, and thank you.
Why is it so darn complicated? It just is. Life is messy, and we just have to accept it. So I'm sure, Leslie, you'd be happy for people to reach out by email, LinkedIn.
Yes.
You'll probably be able to find both of us, and really appreciated the conversation. I hope anyone listening will join us for another episode of You've Got People Problems in the future. Well, that's a wrap on this episode of You've Got People Problems. If you got something out of the conversation, make sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with the other leaders in your network, because let's face it, we all have people problems. You can watch full episodes on YouTube or listen on your favorite podcast app. But either way, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.